Mexico is often reduced to a few familiar images: beaches, tacos, ancient pyramids, mariachi music, border debates, or headlines about crime. But the real country is far more important and far more complex. Officially called the United Mexican States, Mexico sits in North America while also serving as the northern gateway to Latin America. It borders the United States to the north, Guatemala and Belize to the southeast, and touches the Pacific Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, and Caribbean Sea. With more than 134 million people, it is one of the 10 most populous countries on Earth and has the largest population of native Spanish speakers in the world. Its capital, Mexico City, is not just a political center. It is one of the planet's largest urban areas, built on centuries of conquest, migration, adaptation, and cultural reinvention. Geography explains much of Mexico's role in the world. Covering nearly 2 million square kilometers, it is the 13th largest country by land area. Its landscape is not one simple environment, but a dramatic mix of deserts, mountains, plateaus, tropical forests, coastlines, volcanic regions, and fertile valleys. This variety shaped where people settled, what they grew, how they traded, and how regional identities developed. Northern Mexico has long been tied to frontier movement, ranching, mining, and cross-border exchange. Central Mexico became a dense political and cultural heartland. The South and Southeast preserved strong indigenous traditions and tropical connections to Central America and the Caribbean. Mexico is therefore not just a country on a map. It is a meeting point between ecosystems, economies, and civilizations. Long before the modern Mexican state existed, the region was one of humanity's great centers of civilization. Human presence dates back at least to around 11,500 BC, and possibly earlier at more disputed sites. Over thousands of years, complex societies emerged across Mesoamerica, a region recognized as one of the world's cradles of civilization. The Olmecs influenced later cultures with monumental art and ceremonial centers. The Maya developed writing, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and powerful city-states. The Zapotecs built major centers in Oaxaca. Teotihuacan became one of the largest ancient cities in the world. The Purepeca formed a strong state in western Mexico. These societies were not simply background history before Europeans arrived. They created cities, calendars, trade routes, religions, political systems, and knowledge traditions that still shape Mexican identity. The Aztec Empire, centered on Tenochtitlan, became the dominant power in central Mexico before Spanish colonization. Tenochtitlan was an extraordinary city built on an island in Lake Texcoco, with causeways, markets, temples, canals, and a population that impressed European observers. When Spanish forces arrived in the early 16th century, the conquest was not simply a small group of Europeans defeating an empire alone. Spanish success depended heavily on alliances with indigenous groups who opposed Aztec domination. In 1521, Tenochtitlan fell, and the Spanish built colonial Mexico City over its ruins. This moment did not erase the indigenous world, but it violently reorganized it. Mexico's later culture emerged from this collision: indigenous foundations, Spanish institutions, Catholic religion, African influences, and generations of mixed ancestry. Under Spanish rule, Mexico became the core of New Spain, one of the most important colonies in the early global economy. Its silver mines were especially significant. Mexican silver moved through Atlantic and Pacific trade routes, linking the Americas with Europe and Asia. This made New Spain a major hub in the first age of global commerce, not a remote colonial backwater. But colonial wealth came with deep inequality. Land, labor, race, and legal status were organized to favor Spaniards and their descendants, while indigenous communities and mixed populations faced exploitation and limits on power. At the same time, the colony became one of the world's most multiracial societies. Modern Mexico still carries this layered inheritance: Spanish language, indigenous memory, Catholic tradition, regional diversity, and a long struggle over hierarchy and belonging. Mexico's independence was born from crisis. When war in Europe weakened Spain, rebellion erupted in 1810 and developed into the Mexican War of Independence. The struggle lasted until 1821, ending Spanish peninsular rule. But independence did not mean instant stability. The first Mexican empire appeared and quickly collapsed, followed by a fragile republic facing debt, regional conflict, political division, and foreign pressure. One of the most traumatic events came after the Mexican-American War, when Mexico lost nearly half its territory in 1848. That loss was not just a border change. It shaped national memory and permanently transformed Mexico's relationship with the United States. From that point forward, Mexico had to define itself beside a far more powerful neighbor while defending its own sovereignty, identity, and political future. The 19th century continued to test Mexico's survival as a nation. Liberal reforms, especially those connected to the Constitution of 1857, attempted to modernize the country and reduce the power of older institutions. But reform triggered fierce resistance, civil war, and eventually foreign intervention. France installed Maximilian of Habsburg as emperor, creating the Second Mexican Empire. Republican forces led by Benito Juárez defeated that project, turning Juárez into a symbol of sovereignty, republicanism, and resistance to foreign domination. Later, Porfirio Díaz ruled for decades, bringing railways, investment, modernization, and stronger central order. Yet Díaz's system also concentrated wealth, restricted political freedom, and deepened social tensions. Mexico was changing rapidly, but the benefits were uneven, and the pressure underneath the surface was building. That pressure exploded in the Mexican Revolution, beginning in 1910. The revolution was not one simple uprising, but a long and violent struggle involving peasants, workers, regional armies, reformers, land movements, and competing political visions. It overthrew Díaz and reshaped the country's understanding of justice, land, labor, and citizenship. The Constitution of 1917 became one of the most socially ambitious constitutions of its era, recognizing principles related to education, labor rights, national resources, and land reform. In the decades that followed, Mexico industrialized and experienced major economic growth, especially from the 1940s through the 1970s. But political control, electoral manipulation, and state violence remained serious problems. The Tlatelolco massacre showed that modernization did not automatically mean democracy or accountability. Today, Mexico is a federal republic with a presidential system and a formal separation of powers. The executive branch is led by the president, while the legislative branch is the bicameral Congress of the Union. The Chamber of Deputies represents the population, and the Senate gives representation to the states. Mexico has 32 federal entities, with state governments and municipal governments forming lower levels of authority. On paper, this structure reflects democratic ideals, federal autonomy, and constitutional limits. In practice, Mexican politics has been shaped by long periods of one-party dominance, gradual democratization, corruption scandals, reform movements, regional power networks, and strong citizen pressure. Its political system combines European Enlightenment ideas, indigenous traditions of local authority, revolutionary nationalism, and the realities of a large modern state. Mexico's economy makes it a major global player. It is a newly industrialized and developing country with one of the world's largest economies by nominal GDP and purchasing power parity. Its location beside the United States gives it enormous strategic value in manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, energy, and trade. The signing of NAFTA in 1994, later replaced by the USMCA framework, tied Mexico even more closely to North American supply chains. Factories in Mexico produce automobiles, electronics, machinery, food products, and many goods that move across borders repeatedly before reaching consumers. But integration also creates difficult questions. Economic growth has not benefited every region equally. Some areas are globally connected industrial hubs, while others face poverty, limited services, insecurity, and migration pressures. Mexico's influence is not only economic. Culturally and naturally, it is one of the richest countries in the world. It ranks first in the Americas and among the top countries globally for UNESCO World Heritage Sites, reflecting ancient ruins, colonial cities, historic centers, and cultural landscapes. It is also one of the world's 17 megadiverse countries, with extraordinary biodiversity across deserts, jungles, mountains, reefs, coastlines, and forests. Tourism shows how powerful this combination is. In 2022, Mexico was the sixth most visited country in the world, receiving more than 42 million international arrivals. But tourism only scratches the surface. Mexican food, music, cinema, art, religious traditions, festivals, and literature have global influence because they are rooted in deep history while constantly adapting to the present. At the same time, Mexico faces severe challenges that cannot be ignored. Poverty remains widespread, and inequality affects access to education, security, healthcare, infrastructure, and opportunity. Systemic corruption has weakened public trust and made reform difficult. Organized crime, especially connected to drug trafficking, has caused enormous damage. Since 2006, violence linked to conflicts between trafficking syndicates has caused roughly 127,000 deaths. These are not just statistics. They represent families, journalists, officials, migrants, business owners, and ordinary communities caught between criminal power and weak institutions. Yet it would be equally wrong to define Mexico only by violence. The country also has strong civil society, universities, artists, entrepreneurs, workers, reformers, and communities constantly pushing for dignity, security, and a better future. Mexico's global role continues to grow. It is a member of the United Nations, the G20, the OECD, the World Trade Organization, APEC, the Organization of American States, CELAC, and other international bodies. These memberships reflect a country that matters in trade, diplomacy, migration, climate, security, culture, and regional politics. Mexico is often described as a middle power, but it increasingly identifies as an emerging power because of its population, economy, cultural reach, and strategic position. Its future will depend on how it balances growth with equality, security with rights, sovereignty with North American integration, and tradition with modernization. Mexico is not merely a neighbor of the United States or a tourist destination. It is a civilization-scale country, shaped by ancient cities, empire, revolution, industry, crisis, and extraordinary resilience. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.